Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of the Healing Brothers podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Brandon Jones, and I'm with the legendary Sam Simmons. How you doing today, Sam?
I'm tired, but I'm good. I'm good today.
Okay,
I'm
tired
good
but
today,
good.
surprisingly.
Okay,
You know.
okay. We see you updated the tech. Got a sharper image over there.
Yeah, I figured folks should get the real look of the old gray man. You know.
I thought you
Try
were
to
stepping your game up for 2022.
uh-huh. Got a few more things I need to step up, but you know, if I'm gonna do this, I gotta try to halfway do it right.
Mhm.
You know, there's so much going on. But
Yeah,
how about you?
doing all right, man. Just navigating this whole NICU situation with my daughter. She's still there. She's growing. She's almost 8 pounds. She's 7 pounds and 8 ounces at this point, and ready to come home. I think I know we're ready for her to come home. Going back and forth is just too much, but so I've been dealing with that and that adjustment, dealing with the cold weather now that falls over, and just gearing up for the holiday season and all that. But paying attention to what's happening in the community. I've been kind of hiding, man. I ain't been really out doing a lot. I haven't been on any panels or engaging in any community events. I've been busy just handling my business, my family business, to the best of my ability. So that's kind of what I've been doing. But I've been paying attention. I've been seeing what's happening, and it's been crazy. And I think our topic for today is fitting, and it may be surprising for some folks that we're going to talk about. And our topic today is, are Black people in denial of the effects of trauma? And that's a big question. And I think me and you have some similar views on this question, or some answers to this question, and some different views on the answers to this question. But at the end of the day, I think we both realize that trauma is at the center of a lot of the things that we see as community problems. And trauma is not always at the center of many of the solutions that are offered within the community. So that'd be how I'll kick it off for the first part. What are your thoughts? You came up with the question after several weeks of us kind of talking around it. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, the first thing I want to do before we move on, you talk about it being the center of a lot of our problems, and now so that does not ignore systematic problems, okay?
Right, right.
Because you know how folks, part of the way we ignore our trauma is run straight to the systematic problems,
Yeah.
and then want to ask me dumbass questions about, you trying to say there ain't no such thing as racism? Did I say that? Or is that what you heard?
Yeah.
Or is that what you want to hear?
Which is a trauma response, right? It's
Right,
all or nothing. All or
right,
nothing.
right. Um, and so when I talk about, when I think about denial of the trauma, I'm thinking about how hard it is to put our hands around it. I know, like last week, I made the statement, we really need to put our arms around our trauma, which
Yeah.
probably sounds real bizarre to people, right? Why would you want to put your arms around trauma? But what I mean by that is, we talk about, white supremacy. We talk about, white privilege, and we like throwing those words around and terms. And again, I don't deny none of them, right? And those are the things that continue, but has gotten us here, right? And um, so when I say put your arms around it, it's really about really being clear that something's happened to us,
Right.
right? We've been doing trauma work for years. Well, we were doing trauma work before they called it trauma. At least I know
Right.
I have, right? Um, and so putting your arms around it is really saying, admitting and being clear that something's happened to us. Joy, you hear Joy talking about that more too. There's something that happened, right?
Yeah.
And when bad things happen, you got a couple different ways you got to respond to it,
Right.
right? You got to respond to it in the moment, right? And we have done that. In many ways, we are should be commended for that. We have, in
Absolutely.
spite of everything that's happened, we responded to the moment, and we're still here,
Right.
as the youngsters say, right?
Right.
They ain't killed us off yet. But the thing is some of those responses in the moment have become counterproductive in the long term,
Right.
right? And so, how do you evolve past just responding to moments, right? And we know that some of those responses to the moments have been, seen through an eye of resilience, but there's some that's been destructive that we seem to really shy away from. And
Right.
so, if you're gonna put your arms around, that means uh, dealing with the full issue, not half of it,
Hmm.
right? And the other thing about putting your arms around it, I think reason is hard is we feel like if we put our arms around how it shows up destructively, honestly, how it shows up destructively in our community, that validates what we believe white folks think of us, right? That there's something wrong with us, inherently wrong with us,
Right.
right? And that is why we won't put our arms around it, right? You know, by putting your arms around it proves that there is something inherently not wrong with us. Because if you mistreat people at the level of our mistreatment from the time you brought us here, right, there's going to be some damage.
Right.
And if you do the work in trauma, you talk about early, and I equate it to early childhood trauma, right? Early childhood trauma, if not dealt with or not, at least acknowledged in a healthy way, shows up in our adulthood and
Right.
how we take care of ourselves or how we don't take care of ourselves. Really shows up a lot in our relationships, and we're seeing that same kind of thing happen community wide, relationally.
Mhm.
Our relations in intimate relations, our relationships with our children, our relationships with the society as whole, and the more you refuse to put your arms around it, that means that you're less likely to have approaches to it that are going to lead to healing in a healthy way, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, right?
Hmm.
So that's why I posed the question, or around the statement, are African Americans denying their trauma, or even better yet, why they're denying their trauma? Because
Hmm.
what I'm seeing is they are in many aspects, not everybody, right?
Hmm.
In one of the ways of denying your trauma is distraction, disassociation, you know, and so and ironically, some of them same kind of responses, if you look up um, individuals who deny childhood trauma, you'll see the same thing.
Hmm.
You'll see the same, and I've been trying to work out a way to really talk about this and lay it out, because the thing is, if you can able to truly, as best you can, objectively lay out a problem, you can come up, I believe, with better answers or new answers and approaches to the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And we need new approaches because we keep hearing the same stuff over and over and over again, man. Like I've been doing this work with you, Sam, since 2010. That's a long time. To me, it is. Pretty much my whole adult life, I've been doing this trauma work with you. And you were telling me about the same old responses then.
Right,
And those same old responses are still being said today
right,
from prominent people, smart
right,
people with PhDs and books and all types of stuff. And it's mind boggling because it's like at some point in time, we have to realize that mentoring ain't the answer. At some point in time,
Hey, no, wait a minute,
we got to no, nope, nope. I'm about to go down the list. Go ahead.
Wait a minute. Okay, I got to stop you there. What did you just say?
At some point in time, we have to realize that mentoring is not the answer to what's going on in
And
our
and
community.
and what did I tell you
What did you tell me?
many moons ago about mentoring?
You said focus on something else. You didn't tell me it was right or wrong. You said focus your energy elsewhere. And I was like, okay. But I learned that that's not going to do it, because this is what you did tell me. Most of the mentors have their own trauma as well that they haven't even dealt with. So if you take a traumatized person and you try to have them lead or teach or mentor another person, what do you get? I mean, you're good at asking questions that make you think abstractly. You get more trauma, you get more confusion, and you get this level of disconnection and frustration from those mentees. Because
Right.
what happens is, and I've seen this, I've had a client, I'll never forget this young man, and I hope he's doing okay today, because he has to be about 17, 18 years old. He's pretty much a young man now. But I'll never forget this client I had, and I worked with him, and he was in Minneapolis, big boy too. He was like 12, but he looked like he could be like 16 at the time. And his mom, he was 11. His mom was like, he's getting ready to go into the, middle school. I don't know what to do with him. And I said, let him play football. Like, he's got a lot of aggression. Like, this is a big kid. Let him play football. And he was so excited. Oh, Brandon said, and I told him about me playing football younger. So we built this rapport and got him excited. His mom was like, great. And I remember it was like 2 sessions into him playing football. He's good. He's doing good. And then the mom, they just like, the sessions just kind of, spiraled and dissolved. And I didn't see them for a while. And then they came to see me. It was like mid-October. And for Pee Wee football, mid-October, you're getting ready to go to the playoffs. So the season's almost over. So I seen him like, man, I haven't seen y'all in weeks, man. How's it been going? And he just looked so defeated. And I'm like, man, what happened? And he was like, Brandon, I don't want to play football. I hate football. And I'm like, what happened, man? Like, did y'all lose a lot of games? Like, I'm thinking like something like, did you get hurt? Like, what happened? He said, the coach keeps trying to have sex with my mom. And I was just like, God damn, man. Like, this kid was just deflated. Because this was like his one opportunity, something that somebody he built a relationship with gave him a suggestion. It's something he wanted to do. His mom finally let him do it. And all he can focus in is this coach consistently talking about these sexual things with his mother. I don't know if the coach actually did have any sex with his mom, but it was in presence of this boy where he just felt defeated. And I was just like, that's one of the issues that we have, is we always want to point to these boys need these mentors, but nobody ever looks at who's mentoring these boys. And that's part of the problem. And it's just it's like the same thing. These boys need fathers in their lives. Yes, they do. But some of the fathers that are gone aren't ready to be fathers. So if we went back and got them, that might be even more chaotic than them being away. So we have to really be honest about what we're seeing in our community. And if we think that those things are solutions, we have to prepare those people who do that work or who's going to step up, be mentors, to show up in a way that's going to be constructive. Because if we just assume that presence is going to change what we have, and people just being present is going to make a huge difference, we're going to have a huge problem, because those folks have just as much trauma as these children do. We're about 3 or 4 generations out of the crack era. Okay, that means that those young people who dealt with the crack era and all the things that came from that are grandparents today. Those young folks at that time grew up without parents, a lot of them, and now they're grandparents. So they had a rocky foundation growing up, and then they multiplied that rocky foundation till now. And no one's talking about this. We go back to 1982 with the same answers, thinking that we're in that time frame, and we're not. We have technology that has spiraled out of control. We have everything else around us has moved forward, but the solutions in the community. I mean, it's to the point where the old drug dealers, killers, and all them folks who had all that clout in the streets, they coming home from jail, and they lost.
Right. Yeah. And see, the other piece is this illusion that wisdom comes with age.
Absolutely not.
Okay. I mean, I get that all the time from my young guys, right? I remember, I'll never forget this young man, he gonna tell me, well, Mr. Simmons, I don't even know why you talking to us about this kind of stuff. We young. we know you old. Okay, you sitting there talking to us about trauma, how to really be in touch with what's going on with us and quit focus on everybody else without focusing on our own. How do we improve our own lives?
Yeah.
This is just part of being young.
Yeah.
We'll grow out of this. And I always got to remind them is, or how I remind them is I ask them the question: how many of you have an uncle, might even be a father, might be a grandfather, right? Who is older, in their 50s, late 40s, maybe 60s, that are trying to chase the same women you chasing, talking the same mess you talking. And it's always funny when I ask that question, right?
Yeah.
And them cats will start laughing, and you'll start hearing all these stories about Uncle Pookie. And I mean, they come up with some hilarious stories about Uncle Pookie, and being at Thanksgiving dinner, and you bring your girlfriend over, he's hitting on her, and all this other kind of stuff, and so wisdom don't come with age, right? Not this, if without some kind of a growth and understanding,
Right.
without some foundation of self improvement. You do stuff as a child, as children do, as a child act as a child. As we, there's quotes in the Bible about all that, right? And man act as man. But the thing is that stuff don't come automatically, and it's even more difficult for it to come to come when you have this hard shell of trauma that you haven't broke out of, right? And another thing about that whole thing I was talking about, putting your arms around it, the other piece around putting your arms around it as Black people is really about the uniqueness of our trauma. We got to there is nothing wrong with us really. We always want to praise our resiliency and that kind of stuff, but the uniqueness of our trauma here in America, and I know that the issue around race and that kind of stuff is bigger than just America, but think about this: if think about a people whose whole experience along their family lines is tied to trauma from the time they were brought here to this day, right? That has never, ever fully been dealt with or acknowledged in a real way, how unique that experience is. And putting your arm around that and not running away from that. People talking about, I'm unapologetically Black. Well, being unapologetically Black also includes being unapologetic about the trauma,
yes,
as well, right? And being able to articulate that. We don't have that is our. I'm all for your little kumbaya when you want to be kumbaya, but there's time where I can't be kumbaya.
Yeah.
Right. Because I see it all the time. Even more so, even now. Where other cultures, because they don't have that unique experience, who were immigrants to this country, who have a different experience in this country. And that don't mean they don't have their own trauma and didn't come here with their own trauma, right? But the uniqueness of the level of trauma that we've had experience, we need to honor that. And again, these are words that don't always go together when people think about honor our trauma. You need to honor that full experience so you can honor your full humanity, right? We always want to talk about they don't respect our humanity as human beings. Well, part of being a human being is when you hurt, you need to honor that hurt. Because when you deny your trauma, you deny your own humanity.
Yep.
Okay? And when you deny your trauma, you will spend a lot of time trying to uh, 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 discount the trauma, even though you acting it out all the time.
Right.
You know, I mean, just some of the subjects we've talked about. Like, why is it difficult for our community to be forgiving and more so forgiving of each other? That's a result of the trauma. But we call ourselves to being the most God-fearing people in the country. And statistically, we go to church and talk about God more than almost anybody in the country, right? But we have difficulty forgiving, asking for grace, even at times showing empathy for each other. Mm-hmm. And part of that is around not fully embracing. See, if I embrace the results of my trauma, then that those who I fear will use it against me can't use it against me personally, which makes it difficult sometimes to deal with you, right? I mean, I had a conversation with a researcher from the University of Minnesota who wants to do some work with me, right? And when he first met with me, him and his colleague talked with me, and I talked about the experience that like the university has had with the Black community around research and that kind of stuff, and and every time I would say something, it felt like it to me. That don't mean they were, but it felt like to me they were making excuses for the university. And my thing was, I'm not trying to hear that. You need to hear me, right? And, you know, that don't change what the experience has been for me,
right?
You know, oh, we didn't intend to do that. You know, we don't have no. That don't listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying. What you intended and all like that does not make that irrelevant.
Right.
Right. And out of that, the gentleman came and the other researcher is out of town. And he says, you know, she really respects you. She just loves you because I stood for what I believed in and was able to talk about that clearly. Right. And not back down. Right. I mean, there is a time when you need to back down, but there's also a time where folks got to listen without trying to defend the shit. Right. And we see that we see that with our white counterparts, but I've also had that probably also with my Black counterparts. You know, I'm saying something. Well, you did. What about? No. Whoa. Let me hear what I'm saying first, right? And not only to hear what I'm saying, listen to what I'm telling you and how I'm validating what I'm saying. And the ironic part is when people don't listen to you and you slow them down, and after a while they start validating what you're saying. You know, by their response to you, right? Why are you so upset by what I just said? Why are you so upset about what I said about my experience? Why are you so upset about what I've observed? Why is that bothering you so much? Oh, yeah. So, I don't know. So why do you think that African Americans are, you know, I'll say possibly denying their trauma. I would say denying their trauma. Okay, or not fully embracing this concept around Black trauma in America.
I'm about to get canceled. Are you ready?
Is that why you had your drink? Is that why you had your drink?
I had to clear it up.
Is that just water? Or is that some gin or something?
It's iced tea. No, it's not gin. I'm not that old. I don't drink gin, man. No. All right. So I think that the reason why we deny our trauma is because white folks have not validated it. Okay. This is why I think this. Because we have come to a place socially that when white folks pay attention to something around us, then we pay it, we uplift it more.
Right.
And that's through the social power dynamics between black folks and white folks. And that's one of the what I think is one of the biggest challenges for us when it comes to white supremacy and racism is that when white people want to highlight or uplift us or even just be around us, then we care about something a lot more. And I think that we have not got to a point where white people have started to care about the trauma that black people have come across. Because we've been talking about this for a long time. There's been black scholars, PhDs, public figures that have talked about trauma. Then they might not have talked about it like you have. But I mean, Joy DeGrew's been around for a long time. That should be a household name for everybody, but it's not. But if Joe Biden came out and was like, I want to introduce someone to all black Americans, all America. Her name is Dr. Joy DeGrew. You ever read her book? You're missing out. Then we're gonna care about Dr. Joy DeGrew and her book and her work. But since we have this relationship with white folks that when they care about something, we care about it. Then we give our attention to that. White folks have not cared about our trauma because they've been telling us for years, over 100 years at least, to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and get with this idea of the American dream, which doesn't even work for them. But that's been their narrative for the most part for a long time. And with that narrative, you've also seen black folks jump on that same narrative. And then you've seen other black folks who are just like, well, why should I pull myself up by my bootstraps when you ain't even giving me no boots? And both of those are very polarizing areas to be on that spectrum, but both of them don't get us to where we need to be. We need to be somewhere in the middle. Yes, we have been victimized by the system, but at the same time, we do need to respond. Like you were saying earlier, our response has to be something different. And we haven't been given a response, but we also haven't we haven't galvanized ourselves behind some of the responses that have been come up with even within our own group. And that's one of the things I think that we're far down a rabbit hole at this point. I feel like we're divided. I feel like there's probably like 3 black communities. We got the elite blacks, the Jack and Jills who just do their thing. They barely pay attention to anything that's going on. Then we got the folks in the middle that call the have something black folks. These are the folks who went to college. They went to Howard. They might have been in a sorority or fraternity or whatnot, right? They watch CNN all day, right? Mark Lamont Hill, that's their boy, right? That's them, the blue checks on Twitter. And then we got black folks who just like have little to nothing. That's the base of the pyramid, most of folks. And these are the folks that we're usually talking about that are struggling. They ain't got a lot. And what ends up happening is each level determines the boundaries and expectations for the other level. And all of the levels have trauma.
Yeah. Yeah,
and none of them acknowledge it. That's the thing.
Right. They all had trauma, and they all act them out in those spaces differently. Right.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And the ones and you broke it down to 3. I think there's a 4th one that just kind of fits between that group you said that done went to school and that kind of stuff.
That group can be broken down. Absolutely.
Yeah, or between there and what we would call the ones who don't have a lot, who are struggling. There's another group in there, that working poor, right? In between there that bounces up and down, right? Yeah. Because they're middle class. They're doing. They would consider themselves middle class. They're not making a lot of money, but they're trying to do all the so-called right things, right?
Right. They can get by,
right? And they're not. They don't feel they have enough. They if you talk to that group, they don't disagree with us. They might not always fully understand what we're saying, right? Right. But they feel it, right? They know something ain't cool. Right, because they're doing what's so-called with the right things. They're getting their kids to school the best they can. Trying to get their kids to be upstanding citizens. They're doing fairly decent. Still struggling, got a home and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Those folks probably are probably in the more that sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
And but at the same time, they might not be able to fully articulate what's going on, why it's such a struggle,
But they know.
right? But they're not, they don't. Some of them don't want to hear from either end.
Right. Yeah. They just
It's
want to
like, look,
maintain.
man, I'm just trying to make it.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to get through my day to day. Right.
Yep.
And I got to get my kids to school. I got to pay these bills. I'm trying to have a vacation every now and then, and that kind of thing. Right. Like I said, that, and I call it the sweet spot, is that those are the ones that when I'm out and about will listen.
Yes.
To some degree.
I agree.
Right.
Yep.
But at the same time, they're dealing with those
Both
two different sides in their families.
Yeah. Right.
And so it becomes difficult because one of the things that our trauma has done to us is we're very codependent.
Right.
We because individualism has been considered a white thing, right, and a white supremacy thing. Having individual thought, and challenging the bourgeois or the brother in the hood, we feel like we have to be inclusive of them, at the cost of ourselves,
right,
or at the cost of themselves, right, which causes a whole nother level of trauma because you're so worried about being disowned.
Yes.
Right. So that sweet spot group, right? And those are the folks that if you do have any traction with some of this, are the ones you have traction with. And there's a lot of educated young Black folks who are in that sweet spot, or who are feeling the tension.
Yeah.
In there, like this ain't cool, right? And you got one side telling me this and you got the other, and so what happens in the sweet spot, we make excuses for both.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
And because we don't want to be left out, we make fucked up shit okay.
Yeah. Right. We start to just tolerate and accept dysfunction on both ends.
Right.
Stuff that we know doesn't work or is not beneficial, we just accept it. It's crazy. I see it all the time.
Right. And so that's another one of them signs of that difficulty.
I have a good example too. Keep going.
That difficulty. Well, go give us an example.
So a good example of this is a few weeks ago down in Texas when that boy shot those people at the school.
Right.
And then he got out, they threw him a party, and you see the sweet spot folks saying, well, he was bullied. And, and his family, they should celebrate him coming out of jail. It's like this boy just shot through at the school, brought a gun to the school, and shot people, including a pregnant woman.
Right.
It's like, what are we talking about here? Well, he was bullied. So what are we saying? If a kid is bullied, it's okay to bring a gun to school and shoot up the school? That's crazy.
Yeah, but see again, that you're right. That's but that's that piece, right? That how do we support the child who has been bullied, right? Who has been bullied, and it's clear that he was being bullied, and so there's, instead of us breaking it all the way down to address the core issue, now we celebrate this behavior. That's not, and some, when I think about this, and I bet it might be off the mark, and you can help me with this, Professor. That's similar to what you've seen with Rittenhouse, the little white boy.
Yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah,
Rittenhouse. Yeah.
To
a certain extent, but we can go ahead, continue.
I mean, when I say that is, he went there. He was wrong for going there to start with. But but you had folks who came at him with a gun, right? And so again, we can set that aside. I probably shouldn't have said that.
You should have brought it.
But is that muckiness that we done
Yes.
got stuck in, right? And when you bring up the bullying, we got that case here where the daddy told the boy, his baby brother getting bullied, right?
Yeah.
And his daddy told the boy, "We gonna go deal with that bully,"
and drove him to the bully.
and the boy got out the car and shoot the other boy
and shot him. Yeah, we
shot him
talked about that
dead.
last week. Yeah. How do we justify any of that? And why aren't we saying anything about it? That's the thing that just blows me a little bit. It's like the young woman at Prior Lake High School who got bullied, and they were talking about how dark she was and things like that. That was on the news. That was a rallying cry. People were marching. People were out there. They're holding press conferences. And then we got dads driving kids to shoot other black kids. Hello.
So let's not get off the mark. I think we went off on the deep end.
So I'll tie it back in, because when we see these incidents, and when we talk about, are we denying the trauma? Part of it is the trauma's become so normalized that it's easy to accept and to just keep moving on. So when we hear about a 17-year-old black boy getting shot, and then you hear that additional piece that makes you scratch your head a little bit, like, wait, the dad drove the other kid to shoot a kid? We don't question that, because we've accepted that black kids, black males, let's be more specific, that's what they do.
We do question it.
Where?
We don't question it out loud.
There we go. Why?
Okay.
And it goes back to what you were saying earlier. We don't question it out loud because of what we think someone else is going to say about us.
Right.
Doesn't matter what they say about us. The facts are the facts. Like, they're already going to say it. If they're paying attention, we have to get comfortable with being honest about our behavior, situation, and conditions in order for us to move forward and heal, like what you were saying. When we don't do that, what ends up happening is this stuff just continues to get crazy and crazier. And guess what? As we're trying to maintain an image internally, people around us looking at us like we crazy as hell. And they're going to keep building community around us. We're seeing this here in the Twin Cities all day. Hmong folks building community around us. Somali folks building community around us. White folks been building community around us. The Latinx community building community around us. Now, do they have trauma? Sure, absolutely. But they still building community around black folks and still looking at us like, what is wrong with these people?
Well, the thing is that comes back to putting your arms around our uniqueness.
Right.
Okay. And get out of this funk. Right. Because I still say to this day, if we would really put our arms around the damage that this historical trauma has done to us individually, has done to us as a community, then folks would deal with us differently. They wouldn't have no other choice but to deal with us differently. Well, they're still in charge, but still, that being in charge cannot also be allowed in your home, be allowed in how you deal with each other, right?
And your individual decision making,
right?
Like, and in order to, I've always said this, like, we talk about systematic racism and dismantling it. Well, how do you dismantle an institution? Is by other additional institutions. And it's important. It's important that somebody, I just got a text message that the podcast froze, but I think we're still good.
Right.
So it's been on their end. But in order to combat an institution, we have to build institutions and systems. And for us, I think the easiest institution that we can build is the institution of family. Like, we have to really be intentional about building strong homes. And that might not include fathers. I wanted to, but we so far deep down the rabbit hole, we just need healthy adults in homes at this point.
Well, yeah.
I'll take that.
Yeah, and I often say that, a healthy adult in a child's life can go a long way.
Absolutely.
Right? Go a long way. Because at least they give them an example of what that looks like.
Right.
Right? You know, and but trying to force a square peg in a round hole don't do nothing but make things. You're trying to force something into a round hole because that's the way you want it to look, right? And it's much deeper than that. I mean, I in my men's group, I have a 3 o'clock group and I have a 6 o'clock group that I do. And the groups are the personalities of the group are so different sometimes, right? If, one group is younger, another group got a mix and that kind of stuff. And they're all black men, right? And we were talking about aces, right? And the first group started to kind of get it while we were talking about aces, early childhood experiences. I probably shouldn't have spent time on the research itself because we get stuck in the fact that the original research was done on white people,
right.
And that kind of stuff. But the younger ones were kind of getting it. Okay, that makes sense, right? And they start talking about their own childhood and connecting the dots, right?
Right.
The older ones were too stuck on the damn questions. What was messed up about the questions?
They did, yeah. But the crazy part about that is those questions are universal enough that you can still answer them in a cultural context.
Right.
But it's the questions that are not asked that are normalized in our community, which is problematic.
Right.
That's the problem. See, those are in any community, those 10 questions will become problematic in any community. But our trauma is so deep that there are questions that other people ain't even considering.
Right.
That are aces. That's the cultural difference. And I would say you can even use that in even in indigenous communities as well. And I would say in the United States, those are the two groups that will probably need their own distinct questions for ACEs questionnaire. But outside of that, them questions can be universal. You have, incarcerated parent in the home, that's going to affect any kid. No matter what their ethnic background is.
Yeah, but again, you have the issue of how many generations have you had an incarcerated parent or somebody in your family?
Right.
Right. Or are you the incarcerated individual that's in the family? Right.
Right.
And then don't get to the question about sexual abuse or nothing like that. Now you got a whole nother argument and all like that.
Questions come up there.
Right.
What if you're a boy and you were 13 and she was the 28-year-old auntie? Well, or neighbor.
Right. Because those are questions. Those are, again, another avoidance of trauma. Mm-hmm. Right. Not having those conversations. Or the question number one in the ACEs questionnaire, were you harshly treated by your parent? Were you pushed? Were you slapped? Or all the other kind of stuff? There's black professionals that have issues with that question.
Mm-hmm.
They got into, that stuff happened to me. That don't mean they don't love me. I didn't. Nobody asked you if they loved you.
That's not the question.
That's not the question.
Did it happen? Yes or no?
Because like I had to tell them, somebody not slapping you or somebody slapping you does not have nothing to do with if they loved you or not.
Yeah.
Even though people want to equate that if they loved you, they wouldn't do that to you. Okay. Tell that to children.
Yeah. And my daughter just slapped her sister before we got on the podcast.
Right.
Right in the eye. Still love her. They up there playing right now.
Right.
Shouldn't have happened though. Shouldn't have hit her.
So, let's get back. So anything else you want to add to why you think African Americans don't or deny their trauma?
No, I do think that there's in professor terms, there's psychosocial issues here. It's not just it's not as black and white to use that term. It's not just black and white. I think that there's a there's a level of acceptance that we've grown to take communally around our trauma and own it as our culture. And I think that that's problematic. Now, acknowledging it is one thing, but owning it and expecting it to happen is a whole nother. And then also on the backside of that, owning it without expecting something different or better for yourself that you or your community creates makes it even more complex, because the healing is an internal process. It's not going to come from outside. Now, there are things that other people can do, but it's up to us for the healing to take place. And I think that in our community, one, many of us don't know we need to heal from anything. And two, for those that do know, they expect someone else to do it for us. And that's problematic.
Yeah, and and the other thing is some of the things we've used to get through our traumatic experiences as a people as a whole, like for example, incorporating the trauma responses into our culture,
Right.
right? Making the trauma responses okay and calling it culture. So how do you separate that out? Mm-hmm. Right? Because again, back to the doing that adverse childhood experiences thing, the conversation about beating children, right? You know, it's like, you know, saying, well, you know, I was beaten, I turned out okay. And it's like, okay, so let's look at your rap sheet. Let's look at the fact you in my group. Let's look at the fact of your inability to have relationships appropriately. Did it help you with that? Or the fact that they'll even admit, oh, I don't beat my kids. But you done told me that's what you needed. Why ain't you beating your kids?
Yeah, right. But again, not connecting dots.
Right.
Not connecting dots.
But because and it's hard to connect dots when you're in this state of denial.
Exactly.
Of your own trauma, right? You know, admitting to the trauma that you grew up with is not about saying that there's something wrong with you. Again, that's a big piece. If I admit to this trauma, if I admit to this traumatic stuff going on in my community and challenge it, then that validates there's something wrong with us as Black people. You know, we talk about you know, we talk about from time to time the Moynihan report. You know, the Moynihan report had some interesting stuff that came out of it that was true, right? Yeah. But the foundation of it was, oh, it ain't what happened to these people. They're just their pathology is bad, right? You're gonna say something about, well, we need to, you know, they need to improve the, you know, reestablish the Black family. Whoa, what about the whole history of consistently finding roadblocks into breaking up Black families? That don't count for nothing? And you haven't part of that, right? And so our worry is that if we fully embrace this whole, not only the trauma, but the trauma responses, even the inappropriate trauma responses, that just validate what white folks think, or we think white folks think, that we are inherently bad people.
Right.
Right. An ironic part is, if we were inherently bad people, our response would be very different, I think.
Right.
It would be very dangerous for a long time to other folks, not us, the way it is.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
because we are some, we will let other folks off the hook much quicker than we will us.
I know. Which went to my earlier point about other people's experiences and us having this psychosocial connection to these people, and if they like it, we like it. If they don't like it, we don't like it. And they can just steer us, our thought process and our mindset so easily. It's
But
dangerous.
see, there's one thing I meant to say when you brought that up before. Is folks will say people don't listen to us until the white folks say it. What is your response to that?
Me?
Yeah,
I would
you're
say
talking about when white folks say something more, they elevate it, then we elevate it right along with them, right? We
yeah. So
jump.
I agree with that sentiment to a certain extent.
So what would you say to folks and say, well, if white folks don't elevate it, it don't get noticed?
What do I say to them?
Yeah.
I think that their assessment is correct, but it also depends. It also depends on what they're talking about. If it's something that's very strongly disagreeable in our community, it takes us time to agree with it. For example, around things with LGBTQ plus, like canceling Dave Chappelle, that's something a lot of black folks ain't gonna hop on right away. Because the same things Dave Chappelle was saying is what many of us agree with, right? But if it's like this person's a coon, or this person, like if they pick somebody that they want to target or cancel, we'll hop on that real quick. So I think that, or I mean, I think one of the things that also happens is that a lot of things get introduced to us that we're not even paying attention to, like critical race theory. That's like
Right.
been the biggest thing talked about in 2021 is critical race theory. I don't know a black person outside of academia that has a damn clue what critical race theory is until now. Why has that become an important talking point within our community? Because it's become an important talking point in another community, and it's about us. That's
Right.
it.
Right.
But black folks ain't thinking about no damn critical race theory. We try to make sure there's substitute teachers in the schools because they ain't got none in the public schools right now.
Right.
Like it's a whole, like, you know, sometimes I have to check myself because when I talked about those three communities, and really there is four, I agree with you. I have kind of transcended through those four to a certain extent where that Jack and Jill group, that group denied me real quick, but I got close enough. They're like, no, this nigga's he ain't the same. Get him out of here. But I've been able to see a lot just in my development. And I started out in that poor group, and I've been able to just transcend up or over or whatever to this other area. And it's like you pick up on these things because it's different. And I always go back to my foundational thinking, which comes from being that poor kid who just like pays attention to the stuff that's happening around him. And as I get into these spaces and these places, and this is something I learned from you too, you actually checked me on this, and I always keep this in the back of my mind, is I cannot expect that everyone thinks the same just because we're in the same room. And that has been one of the things that has saved me, because I've met some people, I'm just like, you don't know this? Like, you don't know that? And these are like people in positions that move and shake things for the most part, and they don't have a basic foundational knowledge on trauma. And it scares me because I'm like, your whole job is to combat something like this, or your dedication is to combat something, and you don't have the basics from what I consider the basics. And that's just what, like, that to me shows that at each one of these levels, there's an area of focus for them. And one of the areas that I like to focus on is the educated black class, because that's where I spend a lot of my time. Those folks that went and got to grad school and all that and have these conversations, and they get into these spaces and they just become educated victims. And it's like, like you have to do, like, because when you go back home, you ain't seen as a victim. You have made it. Like, just with your degree.
Right.
Like, you can't hold both of those spaces. Like, you have to determine who you're gonna be and show up the same no matter where you go. And I see those people showing up differently in different spaces, and I feel like that holds us back. But that's a whole nother conversation. So that's my long answer to your question.
Yeah. And the thing is, the other thing is just because you in a room of black folks don't always mean that they're going to treat you well.
No.
And you need to hold them accountable just much as you're going to hold somebody else accountable for not treating you well.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we'll let black folks treat us bad automatically because they're black. And ask dumbass questions about why would black people do this? Because they're human beings.
Yeah,
see, that's
exactly.
the whole thing about putting your arms around them. They're human beings. They just happen to be black.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and the sad part about it, and this is might get me in trouble. I already done got in trouble earlier. I probably shouldn't have said,
We
but
almost
this whole,
done it. We got
the
six
whole thing,
minutes left.
the whole thing is when I tell people that when I'm dealing with other black people, I expect to be treated harshly until I'm not.
Mm. Which is sad.
What do you think of that, my young brother?
I think that's a smart strategy. Given the amount of trauma that we've experienced, that is unfortunately a smart strategy. Um,
And let me clarify with the last few minutes. Okay. I don't believe the reason I have to do that is so I don't walk around angry and disliking other black people. Because I've been there.
yeah.
Not all of us will admit that, but a lot of us has had those experiences from time to time.
Yes.
Right. And then we get into this conversation, black people and niggas. Okay, and try to sort that shit out, right? Everybody got some niggerish attitudes, no matter which one of them pieces they got. Okay, don't get it twisted. Okay, but the issue is emotionally they can't help themselves,
right?
And so I don't take that. Helps me not to take it personally.
Right.
It ain't about me, and it's about them. What's going on with them? Because if I react to how they're treating me every time, I lose, right? And I get thrown off course. Right. And I got tired of being thrown off course, asking dumbass questions like, "Why would they do that to me? I'm a black man too." Mm-hmm. Dumbass question. The answer to the dumbass question is they're traumatized, right? And you triggered them by possibly not responding the way they want you to respond. Or just being yourself. Think about it. Think about how many young black folks I done dealt with who feel more comfortable being themselves around other white kids or other kids from other cultures than in their own neighborhood.
Yes.
And so that helps me. It doesn't make me happy. It makes me sad. And when I'm wrong, I'm happy.
Right.
The problem is, too often I'm not.
You're not wrong. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And that's the sad part about it. Right. And we have emotional expectations of each other that we don't deserve.
Yes.
It's like, and we will go back repeatedly to try to get whatever that love is we think we done lost. And let folks do it to us over and over again. That's why we don't believe in forgiveness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because we go back, it's so hard for us to believe that another black person would treat us in our own family, but they're just responding to their trauma. Right. That's all. It's like when you talk about the black kid who go get his education and he goes back to his family and you think the family should be happy, and you get your cousins and stuff talking about you think you better than us.
Right.
What the hell is that shit?
I just got here yesterday. I ain't even said that.
Aren't you glad I even wanted to come see your black ass? Like what? So I got to go home. I got to go home and act a certain ghetto-ness for you to accept me. No, I mean, please. That's the harm. That's why we won't challenge each other in a loving way.
Yeah.
My love is to understand that, you might be triggered in a way that might not be very nice. But now we done got into some other stuff. So.
No, I mean, it's all connected. And I think what you just talked about highlights this box. I feel like it's like a trauma box that we have to put ourselves in. And we it's kind of like double consciousness what W.E.D. Du Bois talked about. But we always play between these worlds, and we stretch ourselves to these spaces that we're not truly who we are. And one way that I've dealt with this, and this is through counseling and doing personal development work, is I stopped trying to fit everyone else's definition of who Brandon should be and just being myself. And whoever liked it, whoever didn't, they just don't. And I just keep it moving. And that has not, it hasn't failed me at this point. But I learned quickly, stop trying to adjust to everybody else's expectations and just do you. And if you don't know who you are, that's where you start. That's part of your healing, is figuring out who you are. And sometimes that does come with getting out of your normal environments. So on that note, we have run out of time today. Any final words from you? Or are you good?
I'm good for now. We'll be back next week.
Next week. All right, folks. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel, share this on all your social media platforms, and we'll talk to you next Sunday, 3 p.m. Central Time. Peace.